must be true, I think. Yeah, because as I said, the relationship between India and Nepal is so different from relationship between India and other countries. And I think the role of the Indian ambassador also is very different, and the range of activities that you deal with. Because in Nepal, it's not only the government of India, but you have all the state governments, you have a lot of non-state organizations, you have family ties. So it's a very different type of relationship. And of course, there is structural issues in the relationship in terms of the asymmetry, difference in size between Nepal and India. So naturally, uh, there is great interest in Nepal on India, and I dare say in India on Nepal. So, in India, on foreign policy issues generally, I find that there is a consensus. So, it's not that, if one government changes and the next government comes, that there is a dramatic change in the foreign policy. There may be a difference in style. As you see, Prime Minister Modi is a very people's man. When he came to Nepal, he was meeting a lot of people, stopping the convoy. I've written about it in the book. And there was a lot of engagement with the neighborhood first policy. But broadly, the substance of the policy, I don't think changes very much, at least not during my time when I was ambassador here. So there is a certain continuity. And I was joint secretary in the ministry when there was a change of government from the Vajpayee government to the UPA government. So there also there was a political change, but broadly the policy I think continued. I want to make a distinction between the government and non-governmental organizations and individuals. So on this Hindu issue, I've written about it in detail in my book. As far as the government of India was concerned, we did not have a view on whether Nepal should be Hindu or secular. But of course, there are organizations in India, there are many individuals, they have a great feeling for Nepal as a Hindu country. And so these organizations and individuals would like Nepal, as people used to say, the only Hindu country, the only Hindu Rashtra in the world. But for the government of India, this is clearly a matter for the Nepalese people and the Nepalese leaders to decide. So we did not have any view on this matter. And this was stated very publicly by our Home Minister, the then Home Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, when he visited Nepal. Well, I was honest. I think I gave a very honest answer instead of trying to guess. And I think I did the right thing because he must have known the answer. Maybe he was testing me. So I think in such situations, honesty is the best policy. So, they say that Kathmandu is the conspiracy capital of the world. And here, everything you see some conspiracy or the other. A lot of Indians have a lot of faith. In Hindi, we say Astha. In, Pashupatinath, Muktinath, and so on. So, this is an individual matter, and I don't think, I don't think there is any government involvement in this. I remember when Prime Minister Modi visited Pashupatinath temple and donated 2 crores worth of chandan to the temple. There was a big hue and cry. Is this a personal donation? Is it official donation? And then, I clarified. I said, look, this is an old tradition that continues between India and Nepal because of our cultural and civilizational and religious links. And in fact, the approval for donating this chandan had been given by the previous government, by the UPA government. So, there is no difference in terms of the importance that we attach to these cultural and religious and other linkages between the two countries. I mean, these are a very important foundation of the relationship. Well, I wouldn't say, it's not for India to be in favor or not in favor. But our view was that the constitution should accommodate aspirations of all communities. It should incorporate the elements of the various agreements that were reached with the Maoists and the Madhesi communities. And those agreements, incidentally, India supported those and also facilitated some of those agreements. So that has been our view, and that, of course, there's been the first amendment to the constitution, so things have progressed. But, this is really something for the people of Nepal to see. Well, our position remains what it was then. We haven't issued any other fresh advisory or a notification, though I know that I think the government of India congratulated Nepal during the last, no, not election, during the Constitution Day. People can have their own, it's a free world, you can have your own view. But the reason I wrote the book was to bring more transparency into the relationship and to explain India's perspective. Because, I've been following Nepal for a long time. When the Maoist insurgency happened, everybody here said, oh, India is supporting the Maoists, India is feeding them, India is giving them, weapons, India is destabilizing Nepal. When the Madhesi agitation happened, the same thing. India is supporting the armed vigilante groups in the Tarai, India is supporting the Madhesis, India is damaging Nepal. So I wanted to give, our perspective on how we looked at these developments. And that is what I have narrated in the book. Even when the earthquake, India was the largest provider of assistance to Nepal. But the response here was that, India is only helping Indians, India has taken over Tribhuvan airport, Indian army will not go back, India is supplying substandard rations. So, this is the psychology. So I wanted to explain this psychology and confront it and rebut it. And I want the people of Nepal also to know that it's a two-sided relationship. You hear and hear only what your own people are saying. Please have a look at what India feels about it also. So in that sense, I hope, it provides greater clarity to the people here. And as I said, in Nepal, there's so much conspiracies. India has done that, India has, done this. So I wanted to explain what is the logic of Indian policy. Why has India taken a certain position? So that people here understand better. Well, I know Nepal is very sensitive to any comparison with Bhutan. And perhaps this is something the Nepalese people have to introspect about. And compare the two countries and see the development activities. I feel there is very little knowledge, about each other. In fact, even between India and Nepal, I feel at the level of the people, very little knowledge. Same thing between Nepal and Bhutan. I don't think there is much knowledge in Nepal about what's happening in Bhutan, and in Bhutan what's happening in Nepal. But the limited comparison that I made was with respect to the 1949 treaty. See, in 1949, we signed a treaty with Bhutan, and in 1950, we signed a treaty with Nepal, and there were similar treaties. And both countries are India's Himalayan neighbors. And the geopolitical context at the time was different. China, communist victory, Chinese Communist Party had achieved victory in 1949, and 1950, they had taken over Tibet. So that was the context in which these treaties were signed. Now, both Bhutan and Nepal over the years have tried to amend these treaties, because in both countries there is a feeling that somehow they abridge the sovereignty of both countries, that somehow it impacts on the sovereignty. So the effort has been to change these treaties. Now Bhutan has succeeded. So I think it's in Nepal's interest to see the new treaty with Bhutan, between India and Bhutan, and see is there anything in this that could be useful to Nepal in its negotiations with India. So, and Nepal should also try and see how come this agreement has been signed with Bhutan, and why can't this be done with Nepal? What is the reason? So the idea that I had in mind was that please examine some of these issues and see how to move forward. And from India's perspective, the same thing. With Bhutan, we have amended the treaty mutually. Both sides have agreed, and the relations are very, very good. With Nepal, this has become such a contentious issue. So why? The 1949 treaty said that Bhutan will be guided, just like the 1950 treaty talks about mutual consultations on security matters and foreign policy issues with Nepal. So the treaty of 2007 with Bhutan is very different. And Nepal wants to have a treaty, which perhaps, I don't know, because we haven't had a serious discussion with Nepal. But our sense is that the treaty is a balance between India's interests and Nepal's interests. Nepal's interests relate to the economic and national treatment. India's interests relate to the security perspectives. So the treaty has to be a balance. Both countries must find something useful in the treaty for the treaty to be signed. If you make a treaty where India is not interested, or we make a treaty where Nepal is not interested, that treaty will not work. So you have to make an effort to accommodate the interests and concerns of both sides. And that is what diplomacy is about. Well, this is, that is one perspective. My perspective is different. And, I personally feel Chinese influence has grown everywhere in the world, especially as China has become rich, has a lot of resources, and is trying to expand its influence. And, the Belt and Road Initiative is a very major project of theirs. And what has also happened is that now there is a big contestation between the US and China. So the geopolitics is changing. And, our hope and expectation is that this contestation or competition does not lead into, more friction and conflict. And the India-China relationship has also become very difficult, especially after the Chinese intrusions in Indian territory in Ladakh, and in fact across the border. So that relationship is very sensitive. So naturally, when we see China, increasing its footprint in our neighborhood and in countries, many countries with which we have open borders, we have free trade areas, obviously this has a huge impact in terms of Indian thinking and Indian policy making. And so, this is an issue that is obviously of interest to us. But this is an issue that we need to discuss with our neighbors. And what I've said in the book is that we really need to step up our own engagement, our own economic cooperation, our own connectivity projects, regional integration, to strengthen our relationship and provide this economic foundation to the relationship. Because what's happening is, since China is rich and well developed, so people are looking for opportunities there. And the Chinese are reciprocating. So I think it's important for India also to step up its economic cooperation programs and connectivity initiatives. And this is being done. A lot has been done. Well, certainly, I mean, my view has been that, our implementation has been not so effective, that we really need to step up our implementation. That, a lot of agreements have been made, but the implementation on the ground has suffered, and that needs to be expedited. And I'm very happy to say that during my tenure, we set up a mechanism between the Nepalese government and us to monitor all these projects. And, we used to meet every 3 months, and all the issues would be discussed. What are the problems, who has to resolve the problem, and then you review the situation again after 3 months. So I think the pace of implementation has picked up now, and 2 checkposts are ready. The Jayanagar-Kurtha railway line is ready. The oil pipeline was built in a record time. So things are improving. The railway survey and fieldwork, has started, feasibility, etc. So things are happening, but I think we need to speed up this process of implementation. And projects should not drag on. You look at Pancheshwar, from the project in 2015 was 38,000 crores. Now we are in 2021. I don't know how much it costs now. So delay means cost, and also opportunity cost, because you have lost all the benefits that you could have made had the project come up earlier. So this is something I emphasize in my book, that we should really sort out these issues if possible, and decide at political levels and expeditiously move ahead on these projects. But I'm happy to say that, the Arun 3 project is moving extremely well, the Satluj Jal Vikas Nigam. And once that project comes on stream, I think people will see, that's a pilot project, and they will see what impact it makes on the lives and livelihood of people of the region. Well, you say suffer, but I think a lot of Nepalese feel that they take advantage of this. So I don't know what you mean, but certainly for Nepal as a small country, I think you need very nimble and effective diplomacy to navigate global and regional developments. It's not easy. And you have to ensure that your interests are protected in this very complicated international and regional environment. So, this depends on the state of India-China relations at any point in time. So at a time when India-China relations are very difficult, this kind of collaboration and, leads to this kind of speculation that you see. But I would like to make a distinction between, the economic cooperation and the political and security cooperation. India also has a lot of economic cooperation with China. So does Nepal. So But when it comes to security issues, where India and China have a very sensitive relationship, or in certain areas that are, very strategic and sensitive, and as you know, we have an open border. Clearly, if India-China relations are not very good, or if there is tension between India and China relationship, then clearly these become issues of, some interest and concern. And I think this is what, some of our neighbors have to be sensitive to as well. Sensitive to India's concerns, just as India is sensitive, to your concerns about economic development and national treatment. I think our neighboring countries should also accommodate Indian concerns, especially as they relate to issues of security. I'm saying security, but we know in the past, how the open border was being misused for smuggling of fake currency, terrorist activities. A lot of things that happened in the past. You can't forget that. In the last 2 or 3 decades, there was the hijack of the plane. So, these are very serious issues, and obviously we need to strengthen our cooperation and engagement to ensure that these negative things don't happen. So, India strongly supports the Indo-Pacific strategy, and we don't think this strategy is against China or to contain China. We think this is a strategy to collaborate on a lot of issues in terms of open sea lanes of communication, COVID vaccine development, various other humanitarian disaster management, prevention of terrorism. So there are a lot of elements. So India supports the Indo-Pacific strategy, and we are a member of the quadrilateral security agreement between US, Japan, Australia, and India. And I personally don't think the MCC has anything to do with any military alliance, or it's, my understanding is I don't see it is against China. Here, some parties seem to feel that if you sign the MCC, that means you are going against China. I disagree with that. And, I think Nepal should take advantage of any country that is offering assistance which Nepal feels will benefit it. In the MCC case, I mean, it's not for me to, speak in favor or against, but if I were a Nepali, I feel MCC is a grant, and it's a big grant, and it is going to build transmission lines which will help in evacuating Nepalese electricity to India. So Nepal will benefit on a long-term basis. It will improve road maintenance in Nepal. So I see a lot of benefits. And I don't see how development of electricity in Nepal or management of roads in Nepal will be against China. So, and if you look at China's own development, China has benefited a lot by cooperating with the US. And China's development, in a sense, is linked to foreign investment coming into China, even though the political systems are completely different. So in this particular instance, it looks to me that Nepal is harming its own interest by rejecting a very big grant in very important areas for Nepal's economic development. But this is something for Nepal to decide. It's really not for anyone else to advise. I'm sure your leaders are the best judge of what is in Nepal's interest and will take the appropriate policy decisions. But I just want to add one more caveat. You remember Arun 3, the first time round, it was rejected. 20 years later, now you have started. So you have lost 20 years. I hope, some lessons are drawn from, some of these political decisions. Because this has been a unilateral decision of Nepal, it has been done without giving India any substantive justification, nothing at all. And one fine day, your government decides to issue a new map of Nepal, taking territories that belong to India. So this is a very unfriendly act, and we simply cannot understand why this has happened. And I have a detailed chapter on this. This is an aspect I have studied in great detail. And I'm hoping some Nepalese experts will respond to what I have written. I've given a lot of evidence which says that these territories have always belonged to India. And so we are very confident in our claims, and we feel it is a very wrong action that has been taken by the Nepalese side, and this has certainly disturbed the very good relations we have between our two countries. Tell me, tomorrow we'll take a big chunk of your territory and then say, okay, now we can discuss with you. So you think you will accept that? This is no way to conduct diplomacy. This is what some other countries are doing in the South China Sea. We have seen. You take over some atoll, some island, you build an airstrip, you put some people there and then say, this has always belonged to us. So you change the facts on the ground, and when you are then in a very dominant position, you say, okay, now I'm prepared to discuss with you. No, we know the land is with India. There is no way the land is going to come to Nepal. But Nepal has taken a legal and constitutional decision. And Nepal has to be responsible. It is a responsible decision you have taken. We are saying that this is not a responsible decision because you have not given us any evidence that you have. You are saying we have evidence. And we have also noted that you created this group of experts after you took a decision that this is our territory. So what does it mean? So is this serious? I don't think so. Kalapani has always been in every Indian political map since 1879. There has been no change in the location of Kalapani since 1879. You look at all maps issued in India after 1879. Every map of India will show Kalapani as part of Indian territory. This became a dispute in the late 90s, I think. Yeah, because when I was Joint Secretary, I remember this issue was being discussed, and at that time, every issue of the boundary has been settled. Only two issues remain, Kalapani and Susta. And the idea was these can be resolved at a political level. And there was a mechanism which was supposed to look into this issue. But as happens to a lot of issues, sometimes they become very salient. There's a lot of activity. When the political fuss dies down, then the issue loses salience, so it becomes an irritant. Same thing has happened with the 1950 treaty. So I feel that some of these issues that we can resolve, we should resolve. And on Kalapani in particular, in my book, I have made very detailed comments. So I'm hoping, and through your channel, I would request the Nepalese experts to respond to what I have said.